We have special guests with us right now. A 50-year veteran of the movement for social justice, Medea Benjamin is the co-founder of the woman-led peace group CODEPINK and the co-founder of the human rights group Global Exchange. She has also written 10 books, including her most recent, co-authored with Nicholas Davies, titled War in Ukraine, Making Sense of a Senseless Conflict. Please welcome to the show, Medea Benjamin.
Hey, Jimmy, good to be on with you. It sure makes me sound old having done this for 50 years, but
yeah,
I guess that's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, I would shave a couple of those years off my bio if I was you.
Yeah, except, Vietnam is an important marker, and that was a long time ago.
Oh, okay. So you started anti-war during the Vietnam War?
Yeah, were you a little baby?
Yes, I was born in 1965, so yes.
Oh, you were a baby. Yeah, no, I was in high school, and that kind of marked me. So, your government lies to you when you're young like that. It kind of sticks with you, especially when your friends are sent off to fight and die in a war that nobody knew what the heck it was for.
Yeah, but I guess that could really form you, right? Your formative.
Deform you.
Yeah. Well, I want to show. So people are familiar with what you're doing. I just want to remind people that you're the person who shows up when these warmongers are speaking in $5,000 suits and dulcet tones about slaughtering people for profit, because that's what it is. And so I'll just show people a little bit. This is you with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken.
The American people don't want to keep fueling a proxy war with Russia that could lead us to World War III or a nuclear holocaust. You're supposed to be a diplomat, start negotiating. If you don't like the Chinese proposal, where is your peace proposal?
That's right.
The American people want you to negotiate. Be a diplomat. Do your job now.
So that's great. Everybody, it's really, it's exciting when you do that. People love to see you confront those people. And I wonder so tell me what goes through your mind when you're doing something like that, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I get so angry when I go to these hearings, and it's not just Secretary Blinken, it's also the Democrats and Republicans. Instead of grilling him on saying, where is your peace plan? Because after all, he's supposed to be the number one diplomat. They said to him, why aren't you sending more weapons? Why aren't you sending more faster? I mean, he might as well be in the Defense Department, because basically, he's an appendage of the Pentagon. So what goes through my mind is, where the American people have to stand up and say, we want diplomats, we want peace talks, we don't want to keep this slaughter going. So every time I get up there, I kind of channel how crazy these people are and how much we need to be a voice for sanity when the vast majority of the Democrats and Republicans are so mucked up with this military-industrial congressional complex that all they want to do is just fuel more wars.
Do you think that what do you think the people sitting around are thinking when you're doing a protest?
Well, some of them are thinking, oh, what a nutcase, get her out of here. But, there was, in that particular one, there was a family in front of us. And later on in the day, I was sitting outside after we got released from jail. And there comes the family. And the guy came up to me and said, we're from the South. I brought my kids to see DC, and they were so bored until you got up and you started yelling at the Secretary of State. Then they perked up, and now they're all excited about, what they can do. And they want to be activists too. So you never know who you reach in these things.
Wow, that's encouraging. Well, so I want to get your. So tell me about CODEPINK. So now, how long has it been going? What have they been doing, and what do you guys want to do in the future? When I say guys, I mean women.
Yeah, you mean mostly women. I mean, we're open to everybody, but we're led by women. And we started out right after the 9/11 attacks to say, don't use this as an excuse to attack other countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. And of course, we were right then. And we've been ever since saying we've got to demilitarize our foreign policy, use diplomacy. We have to move from a war economy to a peace economy. We have to stop spending now almost $1 trillion it's going to be on the Pentagon, and instead put that money into addressing the climate crisis and getting the American people the health care they deserve and free college education for the students that deserve it. So, we got a big task to do going up against this octopus with so many tentacles and so many parts of our country and the world. But we're, we do it with a lot of joy, with a lot of love, with a lot of determination. We're hauled off to jail many times, more times than I could tell you. But I think we show people, not only in the United States, but around the world, that there are Americans who understand the terrible role that our government is playing in so many countries around the world. And we understand that here at home, we'll never get the kind of society that we deserve unless we start taking money from that huge pot of gold, which is the military, and put it into people's needs.
Just during Trump's administration, they ramped up the Pentagon budget $132 billion a year. That's not one-time payment. That's every year in perpetuity for the rest of the life of our country. Imagine if we spent that $132 billion on anything else. Right? Imagine if we spent it on housing or education or healthcare or homelessness. Or go ahead.
Or put it in planes and dropped it down on people's houses.
The money, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, the money, not bombs, anything. Yeah. Anything. I mean, there was a great study that was done by the University of Massachusetts that even looked at the job creation because, we're told, there's so many jobs that are created by the military because they make every little piece of their weapon in another district. And this study showed that you could get so many more jobs by putting that money into education, into healthcare, into green jobs, whatever. So, it's bad for the people. It's bad for the climate. It's bad for the world. And we've got to find a better way, a more effective way to come together to say, stop increasing this insane military budget.
And yes, so the worst way to create jobs is to spend it in the military. It's the least efficient. It takes the most money to create the least amount of jobs. And that's
that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it creates a lot of billionaires, and you see the mansions around. Yeah. You come to DC every once in a while, Jimmy. It was great seeing you when you were there. But take a little ride around the area, especially in Virginia, and you just see mansion after mansion after mansion, and so many of them are people who have their mitts in the Pentagon budget, who get these enormous contracts. And it makes a small sliver of the society very wealthy, and they have to always find an enemy. And of course, Russia, and then have their sights set on China. But for the rest of us, it's a pretty bad deal.
Isn't the wealthiest zip code is right outside is DC, right? Because it's all the defense contractors and all those people. That's why you would think it would be maybe Silicon Valley or Manhattan or something like that.
I thought it was Silicon Valley.
No.
Oh.
No, it's right outside of DC. It's the Virginia suburbs right outside of DC. And, they've moved all their headquarters there because they want to be close to the people who give them the money. And this vicious cycle of the lobbyists that pour the money into the election campaigns of the people, particularly at these hearings that we go to, armed services, foreign affairs, appropriations. It's an amazing system of bribery that somehow we pretend is democracy and try to export it around the world.
I saw you in D.C. We was at the Rage Against the War Machine. Now, CODEPINK didn't endorse it because they didn't, as an organization, they didn't endorse it because they disagreed with some of the anti-LGBTQ views of some of the speakers. And the opinion of this show is that Frederick Douglass said, "I'll unite with anyone to do right and with no one to do wrong." And so,
right, and Martin Luther King said, "If you're comfortable with your coalition, it's not big enough."
And so how do we build a real anti-war or a peace movement that's big enough to make a difference with people like not willing to come together with a big group of people they might disagree with on other issues?
I think people will start coming together, Jimmy, as this drags on more and more, and we understand how important it is that we reach out to people who might not agree with us on other issues. I've been going, in these hearings, I'm sometimes fascinating there about some of these Republicans and why they've been voting against the money for the war, the money for Ukraine. And some of them because they want to use that money against China instead, or stop the hordes from coming in to invade our country from Mexico. But there was one guy, for example, in the last hearing who was asking really probing questions. And I went up to him. He's from a really red district in Tennessee, and said, why are you asking such probing questions? He said, because I hate war and because this is all a scam. He said, you should look up how many of these Congress people in this committee have stocks in the weapons companies. And this is someone that would be considered a right-wing Republican. So you never know. And Jimmy, I remember back in the Iraq war days, remember the guy who wouldn't let French fries be sold in the cafeteria of Congress because the French didn't go in with us on the
Freedom fries, you mean?
Freedom fries.
Freedom fries, yeah. Walter Jones, Mr. Freedom Fries. And we thought, oh, what a nutcase he is. And then he lives in a district that has a big army base. A lot of the people in his district were sent off to Iraq and Afghanistan, and he went to every funeral for every young man who was killed there. And he became the most anti-war guy you could imagine. So you never know. We have to look for allies in Congress wherever we find them, and we have to look for allies in the general public. We have to get the environmentalists to say, if you you got to understand that war is catastrophic for the environment. We have to get the folks in the trade unions to understand that this is not good for building sustainable jobs. We have to get the faith-based movement to be more vocal of saying, this is not good for human beings. And we have to get people who have been fighting against nuclear weapons and the arms industry to come out and say how dangerous this is if we actually keep moving forward, how we get closer and closer to a nuclear catastrophe. So there's a lot of sectors of the economy that we could go to say nothing of the general public that has now spent over $110 billion on this war and counting. And Biden bragged about how we're paying pensions for the workers in Ukraine when people in this country aren't getting their pensions. So I think there's going to be a lot more discontent, a lot more questioning. And I've been traveling around the country with this book, going from city to city to city and trying to stir up more anti-war sentiment. And I'm finding a lot of people are seeing through the media propaganda and really want to push for a settlement.
Yeah, I find, I travel all over the country all the time, meeting all different kinds of people, and nobody seems to be up on this war, right? So, but it's a manufactured consent for this war, like as all wars are. They have to go out and manufacture consent. Nobody wanted to go to a war in Iraq or Libya or Afghanistan or Syria. They had to convince us, and they get the people in the media to do it. How often are you invited on corporate media like MSNBC or CNN?
Zero. I used to be on Fox News under Obama because they like, people on the left who'll come and trash a Democratic president for things like his drone strikes. But I try all the time. I used to be friends with a number of people who have their shows on MSNBC, and the people who book those shows to say, oh, Medea, you're blacklisted for this show. So unfortunately, I can't do that. And Jimmy, I also write a lot of articles with my co-author, Nicholas Davies, and we kind of make a ritual of every month sending a toned down version of the article to the more mainstream press. And since this war began, we have not been able to get anything in.
We covered Jon Stewart, and we were making fun about he got in big trouble for making a joke about the lab leak theory. And I said, boy, imagine how much because all the Democrats turned on him. And I said, imagine how much they'd turn on if you told him the truth about Ukraine, which he never will. He never will. Isn't that amazing to see Jon Stewart turn into this guy? He's pinning medals on Nazis at Disney World now. Did you ever think that he would be pro-war like this? Isn't it crazy?
No, and it's, of course, not just Jon Stewart. I mean, I have friends who are Quakers their whole lives. The war is not the answer was the motto they grew up with. And they say, well, this one is different. they all, there's so many people whose heads are turned around with this. And, even if they have a different analysis about how this war started, why it started, what the context is, what is the answer? The answer is peace talks. You got to come to the same conclusion. Otherwise, you're just saying, okay, let these Ukrainians die for whatever the cause this is. And I think it's so crazy that these 30 Democrats who signed that letter way back in October saying negotiations are now afraid to say anything. I mean, for them, just the word negotiations is like a dirty word right now. Yeah. And we have to turn them around.
Do you notice when people say this is different, then they go on to justify it with some old World War II shit? Like, oh, how is it different? It's like Hitler and like they use the same thing and tell you it's a different war somehow.
Right. The only way to end the war is going to be to negotiate. And so let's just get there faster. But the problem is, as you know, the West and NATO and the Biden administration and this government does not want peace. In fact, there was a peace deal that was around the table. They were ready to sign it, but last in March of 2022. And then they sent Boris Johnson from the UK over to stop and kill it and told Zelensky to stop it. And or else NATO will kill him, or the the right wing in Ukraine will kill him. They've already said they would, the right guard. So, and
then we have confirmation about how the West just blocked the peace talks back then when Naftali Bennett, the prime minister of Israel at the time, of course, there's a conflict much closer to home he could have negotiated, but he was trying to negotiate the one in Ukraine. And he said he was going back and forth from Kyiv to Moscow, and a ceasefire was really close until the West blocked it. So, there are examples and examples. And of course, now we have the Chinese peace plan where the Zelensky said favorable things about it and Putin said favorable things. And the U.S. comes and says, oh, no, that's a terrible idea. That would be against the UN charter to have a ceasefire.
Go to jimmydore.com to see my new stand-up special, COVID Lies Are Funny. For only $10, you get to become a premium member, too. And come see us do our live shows. We're going to be doing stand-up comedy in Milwaukee, Nashville, Honolulu, Los Angeles, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, New York, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Baltimore, Maryland, and more. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.